Between Stacey Abrams and Elizabeth Warren, seems like every female Democrat's trying to make the case for why they should be Joe Biden's vice presidential choice. Kamala Harris joins the chorus in the latest one to discuss her chances in the press. Let's take a quick listen.
Senator Harris, if he asked, would you say yes?
I mean, obviously, I'd be honored to serve with Joe, but I'm just telling you that my focus right now is really on what we are dealing with right now. You're in front of St. Barnabas Hospital, man. I mean, what we're looking at is a situation where we have healthcare workers who are going to work every day because they have taken on the mission of saving the lives of other people, but in so doing, they are risking their own lives.
Daily Beast politics reporter and great friend of the show, Hanna Trudo, joins us now to tell us who might be on Joe's VP list. Great to see you, Hanna. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Very good. We miss having you right here in studio with us, but at some point in the future, things I'm told will eventually return to normal. So tell us who's kind of at the top of the list? How are they weighing this? What does your reporting say?
Yeah, so I think there's right now probably about a dozen on the longer list of Joe Biden's potential vice presidential nominees, but I think on the shorter list, probably about a half a dozen. We just heard Kamala Harris give that sort of wink and nod that she did right before she actually launched her presidential bid about a year ago or so. She kind of said before she got into the race that she wasn't interested in running, and then she ran. So that gives me a little bit of an indication that she might be interested in the VP slot if offered to her. Of course, she said she would be honored to be considered, and that's what we're hearing from a lot of these prominent Democrats. If you recall, back in last month in March during the last Democratic debate, Biden pledged to nominate a woman to that post. So we've definitely narrowed the list down in terms of our investigative work here. So Kamala Harris is top on that list. I think Stacey Abrams, the former Georgia governor nominee, is high on that list. And, you know, one thing that's interesting, reporting this out a little bit, is that Jim Clyburn, who I've talked to on several occasions over the course of the primary, he said publicly that he would like to see a woman of color as the running mate. So he has a lot of influence in Biden world. As everybody remembers, South Carolina was the tipping point of his campaign where everything sort of shifted in his favor. So I would keep an eye on what Clyburn is pushing for, but that's not to say that, you know, folks like Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, they're definitely on the list too.
That's really interesting, Hanna. You know, I also saw Harry Reid, a prominent Biden backer, say that as well, that he'd like to see, he thinks it will be a woman of color, and given, you know, some of the discussions happening, it seems likely. Can you take us a little bit inside the Biden calculus, the campaign calculus on choosing a vice president? Is it about shoring up an electoral hole? If so, what is the electoral hole that they see in the map? Is it about reassuring people that they have somebody competent but who is a woman on the ticket? What are they thinking in terms of picking this person?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it depends on who you ask. You know, he listens to a ton of different people in his sort of official campaign capacity, but also just outside advisors and inside advisors who have been in his world for decades. You know, so I think one of the most important things that I've heard from both from campaign officials and just people that are in the know about how Biden thinks about this in general is that he has to have a one-on-one personal connection and a really strong rapport with that person. And so, you know, that might seem kind of silly or superficial to say, but I think for him it actually does matter. So I recall, you know, throughout the primary, he and Elizabeth Warren, they had sparred many times. You know, they don't have the best relationship going back years in the Senate, of course. Back when Warren was a law professor, she and Biden sparred over bankruptcy issues. So while she's endorsed him recently and said yes, definitively that she would be chosen, I'm keeping an eye on that relationship that they have, because it's not one of the ones among those who I listed earlier that's the strongest in terms of like personal rapport. Now, that being said, she does have a strong base of support among progressives and among, or some progressives, I should say, and among, you know, broader Democrats in general. So it's an interesting calculus, but I do think that one-on-one connection and just having somebody who he really feels he can trust in the way that Obama trusted him is important.
And of course, the stakes are even potentially higher than normal because, Joe may only serve one term, and then you've got whoever is his VP is the logical successor. That person could end up in office for 8 years. So this really potentially sets the stage, much to my chagrin, frankly, for the Democratic Party of the next decade. How are Democrats thinking about that, and how does that influence the choice that the Biden campaign may ultimately make?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, his campaign has noted throughout the primary that he's committed to serving 2 terms, but we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt because I think everybody will say that. And certainly I think that is his hope is to serve 2 terms. But if he doesn't, for whatever reason, he is older and there's all sorts of things that can happen in the future. I think one thing to keep an eye on, in addition to that close personal relationship, is the experience level. And that also kind of goes without saying, and it seems fairly obvious, but I think for him it's particularly important. So, somebody like Stacey Abrams, who was a lower level official in a state and of course lost a statewide bid, she might not have quite the same level of experience as Kamala Harris, who was obviously Attorney General, Elizabeth Warren, Senator, these kinds of, Amy Klobuchar, also a prosecutor. So, when at AOC, I was interested to hear the other day, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez said, experience is something that's really important, and also a woman of color is what she would like to see. So I think keeping a close eye on that in terms of just the years under her belt for whether it's legislative experience or otherwise, I think is an important factor when we have a potential nominee who's in his late 70s.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, thank you for taking us on the inside, Hannah. It's really interesting. We appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, Hannah. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next on Rising, he took off the gloves in a CNBC interview on corporate bailouts. He said billionaires should be wiped out, and of course that went very viral. CEO and venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya tells us what he meant when Rising continues.